Imagine waking up tomorrow in medieval Europe, where your life expectancy just plummeted to 35 to 40 years. That's right. In the Middle Ages, reaching your 40th birthday was considered a remarkable achievement. Your chances of survival weren't determined by your intelligence, work ethic, or even your physical strength. The primary factor? The circumstances of your birth. Born into nobility? You might live long enough to see your grandchildren. Born a peasant? Consider yourself fortunate to reach 30. The gap between social classes wasn't just about wealth and comfort. It was literally a matter of life and death. With your modern knowledge and skills, could you actually survive if transported back to medieval times? Before you confidently answer, yes, let's explore some shocking realities of medieval life. Part 1. Shocking realities about medieval health. Medieval medicine would make even the strongest stomachs turn today. If you fell ill, physicians might suggest bloodletting, deliberately cutting open your veins to drain bad blood. This wasn't some rare treatment. It was standard practice for nearly every ailment imaginable. The theory? Your body contained 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And illness resulted from their imbalance. Too much blood? Let some out. Feeling feverish? More bloodletting. Plague symptoms? You guessed it, bloodletting. What's truly horrifying is that this weakened patients who were already fighting disease. Countless people died not from their original illness, but from this treatment. Perhaps most shocking was trepanation, a practice of drilling holes in the skull to release evil spirits. Surgeons performed this without anesthesia using hand-powered drills. Archaeological evidence shows some patients actually survived this procedure, walking around with holes in their skulls for years afterward. The stark difference between rich and poor was never more evident than in healthcare. Wealthy nobles received exotic treatments like gold leaf, powdered emerald, or even crushed Egyptian mummy. These expensive remedies did nothing medically, but gave rich patients the psychological comfort of receiving special treatment. Meanwhile, peasants relied on folk medicine and herbal remedies passed down through generations. The Black Death killed up to 60% of Europe's population, and doctors were completely powerless against it. Physicians wore bird-like masks filled with herbs, believing bad air caused disease. These masks did nothing to prevent plague, but might have accidentally provided some barrier protection. Women faced particularly grim prospects, with childbirth being the leading cause of death. A difficult birth meant likely death for mother, child, or both. Surprisingly, amid all this medical horror, some medieval treatments actually worked. Willow bark tea, containing natural salicylic acid, effectively treated pain and fever. Moldy bread applied to wounds sometimes prevented infection, accidentally utilizing penicillin centuries before its official discovery. Certain monastery gardens grew herbs that modern science has confirmed contain powerful medicinal compounds. St. John's wort, used for melancholy, does indeed have antidepressant properties. Foxglove, used for dropsy, contains digitalis, still used in heart medications today. If you traveled back in time with your modern medical knowledge, you'd likely be branded a witch or heretic. Suggesting invisible germs caused disease would sound like nonsense or sorcery. Without microscopes, clean facilities, or the ability to manufacture antibiotics, your knowledge would be theoretical at best. Even kings died from infections we now treat with common antibiotics. In the medieval world, a simple cut could be your death sentence. Part 2. Food and famine. If you think medieval food was just bland gruel and tough meat, you're only partly right. What you ate in the Middle Ages depended entirely on your social status, and the differences were stark. Noble tables groaned under exotic spices, roasted meats, and elaborate pastries shaped like castles or animals. Meanwhile, peasants subsisted on a monotonous diet that barely kept them alive. The contrast between noble and peasant diets wasn't just about variety. It was about quantity and quality. Nobles consumed up to 5,000 calories daily from diverse foods, while peasants struggled to get 2,000 calories from the same few ingredients. A medieval feast for nobility might include peacocks redressed in their feathers, roasted swans, or even porpoise. These elaborate displays were more about showcasing wealth than taste. Spices weren't just for flavor. They were status symbols costing a fortune. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg were so valuable that they were kept in locked boxes and sometimes used as currency. The wealthy seasoned their food heavily, not just for taste, but to demonstrate they could afford such luxuries. For the common folk, bread was literally the staff of life, providing up to 80% of their calories. But this wasn't the fluffy white bread we know today. Peasant bread was dark, dense, and often contained ground peas, beans, acorns, or even sawdust during hard times. The grinding stones used to make flour-left grit that gradually wore down people as teeth over their lifetime. By age 40, many peasants had worn their teeth down to the gums, making eating increasingly painful. Perhaps most shocking to modern sensibilities was the meat consumed by medieval people. Without refrigeration, meat was often on the edge of spoiling. To mask the taste of decay, cooks used heavy spices, vinegar, and sauces. The wealthy preferred their meat high, aged to the point modern people would consider rotten. Fish was transported inland packed in barrels of salt, arriving days or weeks after being caught. The smell of medieval markets would overwhelm modern noses, with rancid butter, aging fish, and fermenting vegetables creating a powerful stench. Famine was a constant threat throughout the Middle Ages. A single bad harvest could, and did, kill thousands. During the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, desperate people resorted to eating cats, dogs, rats, and even rumors of cannibalism surfaced. Parents abandoned children they couldn't feed, and the elderly sometimes voluntarily starved so younger family members could eat. Medieval people developed surprising strategies to survive food shortages. They knew which wild plants were edible. Dandelions, nettles, and chickweed provided crucial nutrients during lean times. They preserved food through smoking, salting, pickling, and fermenting, techniques that extended the edible life of perishables. Some monasteries maintained detailed records of crop rotation and soil management, developing sustainable farming practices we still use today. Surprisingly, some aspects of the medieval diet were actually healthier than our modern eating habits. Without processed sugar, most people avoided the dental and metabolic problems associated with high sugar consumption. Their bread, though coarse, contained more fiber and nutrients than modern white bread. Seasonal eating meant fruits and vegetables were consumed at peak nutritional value. The average peasant ate more vegetables and less meat than modern Americans, inadvertently following what we now consider a heart-healthy diet. Fasting periods mandated by the church, up to 150 days per year, created what we might now call intermittent fasting, which some research suggests has health benefits. If transported back to medieval times, your modern cooking skills might be useless without the ingredients you're accustomed to. No potatoes, tomatoes, corn, chocolate, coffee, or tea existed in European diets before the Columbian Exchange. Could you create palatable meals from barley, beans, turnips, and occasionally tough, aging meat? Would you recognize safe wild foods, or know how to preserve the autumn harvest to last through winter? In the Middle Ages, your cooking knowledge wasn't just about taste, it was essential for survival. Part 3. Security and Violence. The medieval world wasn't just hungry and disease-ridden. It was dangerous in ways modern people can barely comprehend. Violence wasn't an aberration. It was woven into the fabric of everyday life. From public executions to casual brutality, medieval people lived with levels of violence that would traumatize most of us today. Crime rates varied dramatically between regions, but justice was universally harsh and often arbitrary. Theft, even of small items, could result in hanging, especially if you were poor. The wealthy could often pay fines to escape punishment for the same crimes that would cost a peasant their life. Justice wasn't blind. It had a clear preference for the powerful. The concept of innocent until proven guilty didn't exist. Instead, many courts used trial by ordeal, forcing the accused to hold red-hot iron, plunge their hand into boiling water, or be thrown into a river bound with rope. If your hand healed cleanly after burning, or if you sank in water, you were declared innocent. God, it was believed, would protect the guiltless. Public punishment wasn't just about justice. It was entertainment. Executions drew crowds like sporting events today, often with festival atmospheres, including food vendors and musicians. Hanging, beheading, burning at the stake, and drawing and quartering weren't hidden away. They were performed in town squares as public spectacles. Children were brought to witness these events as educational experiences. War was a constant feature of medieval life, with devastating consequences for ordinary people. When armies marched through, they typically lived off the land, a euphemism for stealing everything edible from local populations. Soldiers routinely burned crops, slaughtered livestock, and destroyed what they couldn't take. This deliberate scorched earth policy often caused more civilian deaths through starvation than actual combat killed soldiers. The concept of non-combatants barely existed. During sieges or after successful assaults, it was common practice to massacre civilians or subject them to horrific violence. The 100 Years' War between England and France saw entire regions depopulated through systematic brutality. Even in peacetime, bandits and outlaws made travel extremely dangerous. Roads between towns were so perilous that most people never ventured more than 20 miles from their birthplace their entire lives. Merchants traveled in armed caravans, while ordinary travelers joined pilgrim groups for safety in numbers. Surprisingly, some medieval cities developed sophisticated security systems that worked remarkably well. London's night watch system, with its curfews and mandatory street lighting, created zones of relative safety. Some Italian city-states established early police forces and detailed criminal record-keeping. Florence's Mercanzia court handled commercial disputes with surprising fairness and efficiency. The medieval legal concept of the king's peace, special protection for travelers on certain roads, laid groundwork for modern ideas about public safety. Perhaps most shocking to modern sensibilities was the casual violence of everyday life. Domestic violence wasn't just tolerated. It was expected as a man's right and duty to correct his wife and children. Corporal punishment was universal in schools, with beatings administered for minor infractions. Blood sports like bear baiting, bull baiting, and cockfighting were popular entertainment for all social classes. Even children's games were astonishingly violent by today's standards. If transported back to medieval times, your modern sensibilities about violence would make you seem bizarrely soft. Your reluctance to physically discipline children would mark you as a neglectful parent. Your horror at public executions would be incomprehensible to medieval people, who saw them as necessary deterrents and divine justice. Your modern conflict resolution skills would be useless in a world where respect often came from physical prowess and willingness to use force. Could you adapt to a world where violence wasn't just common but expected? Where drawing your knife in self-defense might be a weekly occurrence? Where failing to respond to an insult with appropriate force would mark you as a coward? In the medieval world, physical courage wasn't optional. It was essential for survival. Part 4. Survival Skills. If you were suddenly transported to medieval Europe, your smartphone would become a useless glass rectangle. Your college degree in marketing or computer science? Completely worthless. Your knowledge of modern medicine? Likely to get you accused of witchcraft. To survive in the Middle Ages, you'd need an entirely different skill set than what modern life has taught you. The essential skills for medieval survival were practical, physical, and often learned from childhood. Basic craftsmanship was fundamental, the ability to work with your hands to create or repair essential items. Could you make a candle when your light source runs out? Could you repair a leather shoe with basic tools? Could you fashion a watertight roof from thatch or split wooden shingles? These weren't specialized skills in medieval times. They were everyday knowledge. Food production skills were literally life-saving. Knowing how to grow crops in poor soil without modern fertilizers or pesticides. Understanding how to preserve food through smoking, salting, pickling, and fermentation. Recognizing which wild plants were edible versus poisonous. Butchering an animal efficiently to use every part, not just for meat, but for tools, clothing, and household items. Most modern people would starve within a year if forced to produce their own food using medieval methods. Physical strength and endurance were not optional in a world without machines. The average medieval peasant performed labor that would exhaust a modern gym enthusiast. Women routinely carried heavy water buckets for miles, ground grain by hand, and worked fields alongside men. Children as young as 7 were expected to contribute meaningful labor to the household. By contrast, many modern skills would be completely useless. Typing 100 words per minute? Meaningless. Coding in Python? Incomprehensible. Managing a stock portfolio? Absurd. Even modern trades like electrical work or auto mechanics would have no application. Some professions offered better survival chances than others. Blacksmiths were essential in every community and often prosperous by local standards. Their ability to create and repair tools, weapons, and metal implements made them indispensable. Millers who ground grain into flour held powerful positions, taking a percentage of all grain processed. Brewers and bakers provided essential calories and were rarely out of work. Religious vocations, becoming a monk or nun, provided education, regular meals, and relative safety within monastery walls. For women with intellectual interests, this was often the only path to literacy and learning. Surprisingly, some medieval skills remain relevant today and might be worth learning. Basic first aid and wound treatment without modern supplies. Fire starting without matches or lighters. Navigation by natural landmarks and stars rather than GPS. Food preservation techniques that don't require refrigeration. Hand sewing strong, durable seams that don't require a machine. These skills not only connect us to our ancestors, but provide resilience in emergency situations today. Perhaps most important were the mental and social skills needed to navigate medieval society. Understanding your place in the rigid social hierarchy and how to show proper deference to superiors. Knowing local customs, religious practices, and superstitions to avoid marking yourself as an outsider. Memorization skills in a world where books were rare and most information was transmitted orally. The ability to entertain yourself and others without electronic devices, through storytelling, music, or simple games. Could you adapt to a world where your value was measured primarily by your physical labor and ability to produce tangible goods? Where abstract thinking and creativity were luxuries few could afford? Where your survival depended on practical skills passed down through generations? The medieval world rewarded different strengths than our modern society. Physical endurance over intellectual agility, practical knowledge over theoretical understanding, community cooperation over individual achievement. Perhaps the most valuable medieval survival skill was resilience, the ability to endure hardship, uncertainty, and loss as normal parts of life rather than exceptional tragedies. Conclusion? Could you survive? As we've journeyed through the harsh realities of medieval life, one question remains. Could you, a modern person, actually survive if transported back to the Middle Ages? The honest answer? Probably not, at least not for long. The medieval world wasn't just technologically different from ours. It required an entirely different mindset and skill set. Our ancestors weren't simply less advanced versions of ourselves. They were people shaped by a world of constant physical hardship, ever-present mortality, and practical necessities we can barely imagine. The average medieval peasant possessed survival knowledge that has largely vanished from modern consciousness. They could identify dozens of medicinal plants, construct shelter from raw materials, preserve food without refrigeration, and navigate without maps or technology. These weren't specialized skills. They were the common knowledge needed to survive. What's most humbling is recognizing how dependent we become on systems and technologies we barely understand. Few of us could create from scratch even the simplest tools our ancestors used daily. Could you make a candle when darkness falls? Forge a nail? Tan leather? Make soap? Our ancestors weren't just tougher than us physically, though they certainly were. They possessed a psychological resilience that modern comfort has largely bred out of us. Death was a constant companion, with infant mortality, disease, and accident claiming lives regularly. Yet medieval people continued forward, accepting hardship as the natural state of existence rather than an aberration to be overcome. They found joy and meaning in a world that offered far fewer comforts and far more suffering than ours. Perhaps we should appreciate the remarkable progress humanity has made. Clean water from a tap, abundant food, medicine that actually works, and relative safety are luxuries beyond the wildest dreams of even the wealthiest medieval king. Yet we might also recognize what we've lost in our comfortable modern existence. The deep community bonds forged by mutual dependence. The satisfaction of creating essential items with your own hands. The direct connection to seasons and natural cycles. The ability to endure hardship without breaking. So next time you complain about slow internet or a delayed flight, remember that you're enjoying comforts that would seem magical to your ancestors. The medieval peasant working from dawn to dusk for a meager meal would be astonished by the abundance we take for granted. Perhaps the most important question isn't whether we could survive in their world, but whether they would recognize us as their descendants. Have we become so soft, so specialized, so dependent on technology that we've lost the core resilience that defined humanity for millennia? Are we stronger than our ancestors because we've conquered so many of their hardships? Or weaker because we've forgotten how to endure? The medieval world was brutal, short, and harsh, but it created people of extraordinary toughness and practical capability. Perhaps we should honor their memory, not just by appreciating our modern comforts, but by reclaiming some of the resilience and self-reliance that helped them survive their challenging world.